Hey, did you know that TGSTS is on YouTube and Instagram? We'd love to hear your episode suggestions or just chat with you about life. So find us at hashtag TGSTS and follow, like, subscribe, comment, and share. Thank you. Cheers.
What I'm calling out here as a win is I have achieved that flexibility of being able to work on the schedule that I want, the number of hours that I want. I can work from whatever location that I want. And that has really just manifested and been exactly what I dreamed.
Hey, girl.
Hey Mo, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Looks like we have a guest today.
Yeah.
Hello. It's nice to
Welcome,
see you all.
special guest Anneli.
Hi, Anneli.
Hi. I've known Mo for quite some time. It's really nice to meet you, Em,
Nice to meet you too. How'd you guys meet?
through work. So we met
Work.
when we were working. Did we say the company's name? I don't know, but it's been a while. It's been
Yeah.
longer than I thought.
In the Bay Area, right? I feel like we
hmm
were all in the Bay Area at the same time. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, technically, I think Mo, you were living in New York back then, and we convinced you to move out.
Yeah, it was worth it. Glad I did. Glad I made that jump. But got to meet so many cool people. Like Em and I are always talking about our dreams and following our dreams, what that looks like and how to actually go out and grab it. And what I've seen is a lot of people, including you, who have stepped out and started their own businesses. Not just not just going and filing an LLC, but actually starting a business that's generating income, that's employing people. And
That's the
so,
big part, the generating income part, right? Like an
yes.
actual business. So
So
what do you
would
what do
love
you
to.
do, Anneli?
So I founded Boulevard Recruiting for startups, and we do tech recruiting for some of the tiniest baby tech companies there are. Working very closely with the venture capital community will send us introductions to different tech founders, and we tend to build their founding teams really early.
Oh wow.
So when I say when we tend to, I mean on average, our client is very early stage startup, and then occasionally we'll take a later stage company, but on average, they're very baby tech companies.
Oh my gosh. So obviously you had a background in recruiting, right? Like,
Yeah, well, so I started my career as a CPA of all things. It's
oh
so
wow.
weird to think back on. And so I'm a very huge advocate of it's never too late to try something new and to take a bet on yourself. And I think it's worth taking those little risks in your life to find more happiness. So I was
Mm.
doing accounting for 5 years before I switched to recruiting, and I was very nervous to make that leap. And now it's been 10 years and it's been going very well. And certainly I got a lot of recruiting experience before I started the company.
It's always good to hear people starting their own businesses, but how did you go from I'm recruiting to I'm starting my own business and I'm taking a bet on myself?
Well, my first shot into recruiting in itself was a very large entrepreneurial bet because I wasn't qualified. I had no experience. I was 30 years old and I was just trying to break in some way. And I don't think if I had gone the route of trying to get into a tech company, it would have manifested anything for me. So I started my career in a recruiting agency where I was 100% commission based. And I was terrified to make that jump. I wasn't starting my own company, but I certainly was starting my own practice. And I think that having that commission structure made it more comfortable for the company to take a bet on me as someone without a lot of experience. And so that's one way to break into something you haven't done before. And so that I was there for about a year and a half, and one of our clients recruited me to their company where I met Mo. And that was an amazing experience. And I was there for 3 years. And as I was starting to think through my growth and what I wanted next, I really wanted to get exposure to engineering recruiting, particularly. So I was running all the business recruiting for that company. And I ended up deciding to go to a startup that was pretty early stage to get that experience. A lot of times you'll see startups will give you opportunity to do things you haven't done before. And so fortunately that startup experience went very well. And so it's enabled me to attract a lot of different startups now to work with as an entrepreneur. And yeah, that was about 4.5 years ago now that I started Boulevard Recruiting.
When you started, you had recommendations, you had referrals. How did you start with and build your client base?
So it's kind of a weird story because when I started the company, I wasn't necessarily looking to build to be an employer. I was really just solving for wanting to have my own little practice and be my own boss. And I was very motivated by flexibility, even more than money. And so when I started the company, I was pretty much envisioning that it would be me doing a couple searches here and there for some of my friends, most likely. And we got pretty fortunate in the demand that came very quickly that enabled us to scale to almost 20 people pretty fast. But it's interesting to think back on because before I started, I definitely had an imposter syndrome. I was very nervous about where would I get clients, how would I get clients, who would want to work with me. And so while I had embarked on this journey, really intending to take a proper break after being in the startup tech world for a while, I wanted to take a proper break before I started the company. But when my first sales lead came in, I felt almost like I had to jump on it because I didn't know if there would be another one. And so I just jumped in and grabbed the first thing that came at me. And just looking back, it's just kind of weird because we've worked with so many companies at this point with so many people. So it's really wild to think back on just how nervous I was and how I just really didn't know if it would work out. And I thought it was going to be this small thing. But to more pointedly answer your question about where did the clients come from? So the first one came through an an engineer I'd previously worked with, her husband had started a company and they were having a really hard time filling this very difficult role. And so she introduced me. And then the next one came in was my former employer that Monique and I both worked with, and I got in through that route. And then the next one came in, and it was the CEO of the company I just worked for referred me over to another startup that was hiring. And so it was coming in from a variety of places, and it still does today.
So it sounds like you built a strong reputation where you were able to just get recommendations from previous employers and through that network.
Yeah, I think that the warm network is always the easiest approach when it comes to recruiting and finding a great candidate. They're always the fastest to respond if someone knows them. And I think it goes the same if you are looking for clients. Who do you know that can give you a warm introduction?
And so it's been 4.5 years. What have been some of your biggest challenges so far?
So I would definitely say entrepreneurship on some level requires capital. And so there's going to be different levels of how much it requires. And I think in the case of a service company, possibly I would say on average requires less capital. Just start working and start billing for your services versus a retail company. You have to buy the inventory and you have to buy the storefront. Software is a really hard one to develop because you have to pay engineers that are very expensive, and it takes a while to develop the product before it's viable for selling. So in our case, we were very fortunate in that we were able to start generating revenue very quickly. But in any case, any entrepreneur that you talk to is going to tell you that they put thousands of dollars into the company, or at a minimum, they spend a lot of their time for free. And so that is something that, of course, I share that same journey. And we were very fortunate, and the company was profitable too. We had our first unprofitable year last year, which was very challenging. But I would say that I've always been more inclined to keep money in the business in order to weather any storm. And so I think that if you're going to embark on a new entrepreneurial endeavor, to have some sort of cash or just be willing to take a cut for a while. And so some people might take loans, some people might take on investors. I chose not to do that route because I really feel that I don't want to have a boss on any level, and having an investor would make me then feel that they're now my boss. But as a result of that, I mean, I have been living more modestly than I had previously. I've just been very conservative in what I'm paying myself. And when I do get money, I keep it in the business. So I think that that is the biggest, most blaring challenge when it comes to starting in a company. Um, but that being said, it's been so worth it. So like on the flip side, I do feel like I've really accomplished my goal of having a lot of flexibility and just really loving what I do every day.
Yes, and speaking of the flip side, what are some wins that you've seen in having your own business?
So I am recently a mom. I have a 1-year-old baby.
Yay.
He's so cute. And when I had him, I was determined to go on a maternity leave, which can be very difficult as a business owner, but I was very committed to doing that. And when he was first born, I really was just reluctant to leave him very much. So I worked pretty part-time when I was first getting back in. And I think that what I'm calling out here as a win is I have achieved that flexibility of being able to work on the schedule that I want, the number of hours that I want. I can work from whatever location that I want. And that has really just manifested and been exactly what I dreamed. And additionally, so we started just before COVID, and COVID obviously was very crazy, but one of the big pluses for us was that a lot of companies started working remotely. And that really coincided with my vision of I wanted to work remotely for the rest of my life. And so I had already started this remote company and I was traveling. I started the company on the coast of Washington in a little cottage. And I went to New York and DC and Park City and Boise, where my parents are, and down the coast of California before COVID hit. And I really feel like I've taken advantage of that too. Like my husband, my son, and I all worked in Puerto Rico for 3.5 weeks earlier this
Nice.
year. And so the flexibility has just been amazing. And then I would say too, just we keep bringing in clients. That's amazing. Like I had this big insecurity that that wouldn't happen, but it does continue to be the case. And so I think that it's been incredible to meet so many and other founders and people who are really passionate about building their companies. And that has been really rewarding.
I have a question, Anneli. So it sounds like your company's kind of ramped up, and you said you keep getting clients. You were talking about warm intros. It sounds like word of mouth and those warm intros are really helpful. What are you doing as far as marketing is concerned? Like I think that's a big question for a lot of people who are starting their companies, starting their whatever their ventures are, how to get the word out. What is the most successful way to do that? Have you had any
Yeah.
challenges with that? What do you have a marketing
Oh, I
strategy,
suck
marketing
at
person?
that.
Yeah.
I suck at that. But I will say that you're catching me in a moment where I am really starting to think about it more seriously and talk to more advisors about what that could look like for me. For
Mm-hmm.
me, I've just been very casual in terms of the recruiting population and candidates. A lot of us are on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And so a very basic thing you can do that is absolutely free is just start posting. And I think sometimes it can feel a little uncomfortable and you're really putting yourself out there. And I definitely think other people can do this better than me. And I am seeking advisors on how to have a better strategy with it. But I think at a very minimum of just reminding people who you are and what you stand for and what you do. And if you do have any kind of network, it keeps you on their radar. And so maybe this person doesn't need recruiting services right now, but I can't tell you how many times people have said, "Hey, I've been following you on LinkedIn for a couple of years now. Congratulations on Boulevard. We're hiring. We'd love to work with you now." And it's just really cool to see that's a simple way that has been effective for us.
Yeah. It's like planting seeds.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
what we haven't done is created paid for ads or
Mm.
try to optimize our SEO. It's been just very casual in a way. And I think that for me personally, my focus has really been on delivering very excellently so that our clients sing our praises and they're likely to recommend us to somebody because truly the business is coming from referrals today. And so for me personally, I think I benefit from being in a space that we found a product market fit really quickly. If you have a new product, a new idea, a new concept, there can be a huge energy that goes into the first several months or even years of building your company of what do people want to pay me for, right? And so
Right.
we are plugged into a space that's already proven and we already know that it's a need. And so it made that a little bit easier. And so then it becomes, well, if there's not this huge barrier to entry, anyone can really go start their own recruiting firm. And especially now in today's market, with so many more recruiters in the market competing for the same business, I think for us, the focus has been more, how do we deliver so excellently and make sure that everyone who works with us would refer us again or come back to work with us again and refer us to their friends, which does happen. And your customers know other of your target customers. They tend to hang out, right? Like startup founders know other startup founders. And so for us, I would say that is one thing we did well, is maybe we were a little bit more restrained on trying to really push the sales and marketing and really more focused on how do we make this product really awesome.
And how many employees did you I think you said something like 20, or
so we started just before COVID, and so then there was, I don't know how familiar with the recruiting market, but the space surged and hit a high that it hadn't seen since 2000, when the birth of the internet happened, basically. And so it was this wild market where we had a wait list and we weren't taking on any new clients, and we were at a premium pricing, and we were just trying to retain our recruiters because they were getting poached right and left. And then tech experienced this major scale back with all these layoffs, and companies aren't hiring. And tons of recruiters are now in the market as a result. And so we definitely have had to pivot a few times in our model to where we scaled fast and then we scaled back down and then we kind of grew a little bit. And today I would say in total, we're around 15 people, but now it's a split between full-time employees and contractors. That gives us a little bit more flexibility as we scale.
Wow. It sounds like a lot. I'm just going to
say. It's a lot.
Like just the business, like, you know, the business of recruiting, but then the business of running a business is like a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like, has that been a learning curve, or how has that gone?
Yeah. So one, I'm a reluctant CEO, and I think Mo can testify. I have always said, Boulevard's going to be whatever the world wants us to be. Like, I'm going to work with people that want to work with us. We're going to hire the people that want to work with us and just see what the company wants to be. And that really worked well when the market was crazy good. But now I feel that this market really calls on me to be more intentional and actually go after things and start to be more of a CEO that actually understands our financial statements and actually has a budget, which we weren't doing previously. And I think one of the legs up I've had is I am a CPA. And so I do understand these things a little bit more comfortably, but that doesn't mean I started the company on the best practices and I was really geeking out on finance. I was just going with the demand and scaling the company as fast as I could. And then once we reached a pace where I couldn't scale more without sacrificing the quality, we just stopped and started to build all these systems and processes to further scale. But I would say that through that entire time, it's been 4 years where I've kind of taken a back seat and just watched what happened and just let the customers come to me. And more recently, I got a coach to really coach me on profitability and actually going after, like, defining your target customers and saying no to the customers that aren't in your sweet spot, and freeing up your bandwidth to go after the ones that are going to pay more dividend. And then actually putting together budgets and understanding our costs, and like, not just can we do this cost now, but is it scalable? Or are we going to keep being able to do this next year? That has been a huge learning curve. And I would say that the role is way more finance based today than it used to be. And I also think that it's kind of a symptom of a lot of founders in Silicon Valley in the last couple of years, where money was cheap and it was just dumping into the valley, and startups were grabbing that money and scaling. And a lot of companies weren't thinking about budgets. They were just trying to go as fast as they could. And I think now today, this market calls upon founders to really be more serious about that stuff. And I do think that we're going to be much stronger on the other side.
Wow.
But it's wild. I feel like I wake up every day and I almost don't let myself think about the weight and the responsibility, because it can be a little bit overwhelming if you really just stop and think, like, wow, there's a lot of things that you have to think about that you could just choose not to. And there is a cost. Every time you choose not to think about something, you can see that in the business a few months later.
That sounds like a lot of responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah. But I will say, though, if anyone's curious to be an independent contractor and go start making money and billing for their services, that business is a lot easier to start than one where you start employing a bunch of people and then scaling the sales to meet the costs of a growing cost basis. So I would definitely say if anyone is leaning towards entrepreneurship, but all that sounds a little bit crazy, there is an in between where you can be a solo practitioner.
Yeah. I think there's a big push for that, especially post pandemic. People got a taste of kind of a little bit of freedom, not having to do the commute, working from home, that type of thing. And there was almost like a awakening for people to realize, hey, maybe I want to do something for myself. Maybe I don't want to have a boss. Maybe I want to try a different, profession or something. And so I feel like there's a lot of change. And I think that the advice and the things that you're sharing with us are really helpful, because from the outside, it looks like a whole lot. But just the idea of starting. I think that's probably maybe the biggest step. It's just getting going.
Well, I feel what you're saying so much, because I think so there was a question in the notes that Mo had sent me just in terms of executing, like how do you execute on actually starting a company? And I thought through, there was these couple of things I did to register us and set up the bank account and get my email address and all those things. But then I realized really the message is just start, because I feel like you could get caught up in this needing everything to be in place, and you need to have your plan and you need to have your everything. And I just feel like there's so much reason to delay doing it. And sometimes you just have to start doing something and realize that you're going to learn on the job as you start delivering your product and selling it. And the faster you can start getting that in front of your customers and getting their feedback on it, I think the faster you're going to scale into be a sustainable business.
That's good advice. Because I think that's the part, the tricky part is just the starting. Because I think there is a desire to have all your ducks in a row and have a plan, like a very set out plan. And that can really slow people down. Yeah.
And I think it helps to be flexible. So it's like, I went into this because I love finance recruiting. I thought I was going to go start a finance recruiting firm. And at one point I thought I was going to start a firm that recruited other recruiters. And ultimately my company does a lot of engineering search. And that's not necessarily what I set out to do, but I stayed very open to the types of clients that wanted to work with me. And we found our product market fit pretty quickly. I think sometimes founders will go in with very intentionally about what they want to be doing, fiercely stick to that. And sometimes the market doesn't want to pay them for that. And so the company might not sustain at that point, but I would just encourage people to be a little bit flexible and try different things and try different models, and just maybe go a little bit outside your comfort zone and just see what's more sustainable.
Thank you for sharing that advice. And I know you've mentioned how you started and looking back at about how you were kind of taking whatever you got and letting the company develop like that. But what looking back in hindsight, is there anything you would do differently, or what lessons have you learned that help you grow today?
So I would say that comment about being more serious about finance, that's a good idea to start sooner, I think. Like I think that there were moments where I was chasing the sales and trying to grow quickly, and I would make decisions where I'd be like, okay, I'm going to spend this money and figure it out later because I know I need it to do this thing. And there's almost this fear that if you don't move fast, you're going to miss opportunity. And I think that the slow, systematic thinking that finance requires, of just really sitting down and looking at the budget and how does this project over time and what are other alternatives to that expense I'm about to pay, that's an exercise that I wish that I had done sooner, because every time I've just started spending and decided to deal with it later, it's been very painful financially. And so I think that if I were to do it again, I would bring a little bit more financial rigor into it earlier on. And then similarly, I would say resist taking on customers that aren't going to pay you enough to make it worth your time. I think, again, if you're in this, I'm just starting, I don't know where it's going to come from, and you're operating in this insecurity, sometimes I have been inclined to say, okay, I'll take this client that's like going to make us this much money. And it ends up being the one that causes us the most pain and just isn't worth it at all. Are you guys familiar with the Pareto principle? It's something like 80% of outcomes come from like 20% of, I don't know exactly what it is, 20% of the causes, I guess. But
Not familiar.
The way that I've seen it in my business is like 20% of your best customers make probably 80% of your revenue, and 20% the worst customers cause 80% of your pain. And so one of the things that my coach has been doing is just really assessing different types of engagements that we've done over time and which ones made the most money and which ones were joyful to work with those clients, and start to say no to the ones that are going to cause a ton of pain and actually not make you more money in order to make room for those more lucrative accounts. So those are two things where I would say I would just be a little bit more strict. And probably the question though is interesting because it's, in hindsight, what would you do? And the reason I would be doing this is because now I have confidence because I've been burned now and I know what's going to happen. But when you're doing that, it truly is only clear in hindsight sometimes. You know,
So
I was doing the best that I could do. Yeah. And I think it's not that it's, but I do think maybe what I'm saying though is relevant to everybody, where it's like the first one being don't spend your money on whatever. Like look at your options, come up with a budget, maybe have a trial period and be like, if these are the objectives I want to get out of this expense that I'm making in the next 3 months. And if it doesn't deliver the return that I'm looking for, then drop that experiment, but just maybe be a little bit more controlled on spending. But then again, I would always go back to, but if that means you're now going to wait to start your company in order for you to take a finance class, then I would say that's a little bit too much. I would more encourage you to start going because you're going to start learning these lessons as you're doing it.
I feel like that's been consistent advice from entrepreneurs is just get out there and start doing it. Mm-hmm. And it does sound very frightening when I think about it, because for me, I know I'll be like, what? Okay, just get out there and start. What if I do something wrong? I'm going to jail now, like.
What business are you doing?
I know.
Put you in jail.
To the extreme,
like worst case scenario.
Worst case.
Goodness.
Yeah.
The very worst case.
I'm like pretty moderate in my risks. I wouldn't say I'm totally risk averse, but I'm not a daredevil either. But I would say I'm totally down for make the mistake and pay for it later. Like if I'm not aware of some law in some state that requires me to file this certain return and I'm not aware of it, they'll usually find you and be like, hey, you owe us this return and here's the penalty. But like, I'm willing to pay the penalty to learn the first time. But then the thing is to just never do that again. Let's just stay compliant once you know what's happening. But sometimes it's just too hard to go try to understand every little thing before you get started. And I think you do have to have a little bit of a willingness and comfort in making mistakes, because there's no way you're not going to make mistakes. That's just the whole thing you're signing up for.
You gotta be fearless, I guess.
So what's in the future? What's in the future for you? What's in the future for Boulevard or any other?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I think that we're going to grow a little bit in the future. I don't know if that's now. We're going to go very tight with the market. This is a weird market to grow in, but I do think that in order to sustain the cost of the company, we want to be like a certain size. But also I don't see us being this huge company either. In the service business, your work has to be awesome. I am really nervous to scale to a point where we lose the amount of quality in our product. So I would say in the future, one, let's just get through this market. It's really, really tough out there. Let's survive and then probably grow a little bit and then just stable out and I want to be an institution in Silicon Valley. I want all of the VCs to know who we are. I want people to see us as the place to build your founding tech teams. And I think that it can take some time to build that sort of reputation. And so I think we just have to be very focused on delivering excellently and make sure that that keeps happening over and over and over again. But to that extent, I could see us being somewhat bigger, but not that much.
Yeah, I don't think we've touched on it, but you've been mentioning terms like joy and excellence. Where does that fit in Boulevard?
Well, those are our two values. I was very inspired by Brene Brown and Figma, my old employer. Figma is a design tool and really is thoughtful about designers and having things that are memorable, having a beautiful experience. And so they only had 3 values and we all remembered them and they were each 2 words. So it's be bold, have fun, foster inclusivity. And I thought that was really powerful because the prior company I worked for, we had pages of values and I don't remember a lot of them. And so I thought that was really neat to just pick a couple. And then I read a book by Brene Brown, I think it was in Dare to Lead, where she encouraged you to get your values down to just two. And she argued that if you even add one, it probably fits nicely into one of the two categories. And so I went through a long exercise and working with the team and just really thinking through when we've really crushed it and what we really love about being here, and came down to our two values that really drive us, being joy and excellence. And I think sometimes it kind of represents, I am a Libra, I'm not super into astrology, but I definitely identify with the balance of things where one's kind of a feminine value and one's kind of a masculine value. And I think that I'm constantly striving to have that work-life balance with my work too, and spending time with my baby. And I think that excellence, when you're really hardcore about it, can sometimes risk joy in the company, you know, if you're just super extra about it. And so the joy is really calling us to balance the fierceness of Silicon Valley that we're working in with some humanity and community and making sure we prioritize our personal lives. But I've also learned that when you deliver very excellently, it in itself is a joyful experience. When you're doing really good work that you're really proud of with people that are awesome and your clients love you and they're singing your praises, that's a really joyful experience too. So that's where that's coming from.
Oh, I love that. Love it.
Gotta get a tattoo. No, I'm just kidding.
So where can people find you if they want to follow your journey?
So best place is LinkedIn, Anneli Scopazzi, and then Instagram. I don't know. I'm not really into TikTok. I'm trying to get more into video this year, so you might be seeing more videos coming from me. And if I get a TikTok at that point, I'll let you know.
Wow. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much,
Awesome.
Anna.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
so good to
you.
see you. You guys
Yay.
are wonderful. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank
You
you.
too.
You too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.